This is a RODFM special feature.
ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਆਪ ਸਭ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹੋ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੋਂ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਸਕੂਲ ਰੀਐਂਟਰੀ ਪਲਾਨ ਐਲਾਨਿਆ ਉਦੋਂ ਤੋਂ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚਿੰਤਾਵਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਦੇ ਮਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨੇ। ਕਾਫੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਅਨਸਰਟਨਟੀ ਹੈ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਔਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਲ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਰੱਖ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਅਜਿਹੇ ਹੀ ਸਵਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੀ ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਧਿਰ NDP ਵੱਲੋਂ ਵੀ ਉਠਾਏ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਨੇ ਜੀ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ NDP ਦੇ ਡੈਪੂਟੀ ਲੀਡਰ ਸੇਰਾ ਹੌਫਮੈਨ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਕ੍ਰਿਟਿਕ ਵੀ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਉਹ ਕੁਛ ਸਾਡੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਜੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਵਾਬ ਦੇਣਗੇ। ਸੋ ਆਓ ਜੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ।
That's an excellent question, and what parents and staff members are telling me are that they're concerned. They're looking at the evidence. Right now, the Chief Medical Officer of Health tells us we have to be 2 meters apart, for example. Classrooms aren't designed to have 40 students 2 meters apart. They're just not big enough. So, especially when you're looking at the younger grades, most of them don't even have desks anymore. They have tables with 4 or 6 students at a table. That is not following the advice around physical distancing. And other jurisdictions, for example, Israel reopened without reducing the class sizes, and they saw outbreaks in their schools. And as a result, they've had to close them immediately, again, which is very hard for parents, and then adapt, have smaller class sizes, figure out ways to distance students. We think it would be smart for this government to look at what's happened around the world, take that evidence into consideration, and act on it right now so that we can have a stable, safe year of school, and so parents can have the confidence that their schools won't have to close because their children are getting sick. I deeply respect Dr. Hinshaw. I was the minister when she was hired to work in the department, and she works for the government. Yeah. And her advice to date has been no more than 15 people cohorting in a cluster, keeping 2 meters physical distancing. Her advice isn't you should put more money into education. That's not her job. Her job is to give the medical advice. So if they actually wanted to demonstrate respect and understanding, I think, for the advice she's been given, they would put more resources in so that we could do things like more hand hygiene, more washing, more physical distancing, taking her advice and learning from what's happening around the world. Because I think there's no reason why, Ontario, many people think Ontario isn't funding enough, but they put $300 million new dollars in after the pandemic, additional money to make sure that they could do things like hire nurses, make sure that they have more hand sanitation, make sure that they're hiring more teachers. They're only having 15 students in classes grade 9 and up. Why is it that Alberta children don't deserve the same protections and the same safeguards? And we think they do. We think they deserve even more. We're really proud of the education system we have here in Alberta, and we want it to continue to be world class, and for our parents to have confidence that their kids are getting the proper supports. So the reason why we put this forward is because we think governing is about priorities. And when you look at what some of the priorities of this government have been so far, they found $4.7 billion to give to profitable corporations. They found $7.5 billion for one pipeline going to one market. We think that our children deserve the same kind of protections and priority. We're not asking for $7.5 billion. We're not even asking for 4.7. We're saying about a fifth of that into making sure that schools are safe, because you don't have a good economy without having good, stable public education, and because our children deserve an opportunity to learn. That is a huge one. So one of the first things that this government, Minister LaGrange and Mr. Kenney did during the pandemic is fire the more than 20,000 education workers. And many of those were educational assistants who worked with students who had disabilities. So they lost a good chunk of last year when their support worker was laid off. They want to make sure, the parents that I'm hearing from, that those workers are rehired at a minimum so that when their children go back to school, they have somebody there who will help them keep safe. There are a lot of children who have a hard time with emotional regulation and boundaries, and they need that person there to support them in keeping them healthy and keeping the rest of their peers healthy. So that is probably number one. Mental health is another one that has been really attacked. The funding for it used to be under a program called RCSD, and this government got rid of that. And we know that after the floods here in Calgary or the fires in Fort McMurray, mental health needs went up when kids went back to school. And this is happening all across our province. We should have more support on helping students and staff and families stay well, including their mental health, instead of cuts to give away money to corporations. My take is that if the minister thinks that this is the time to be talking about curriculum, she's not talked to any parents. Parents are talking right now about safety. What do we make sure that when kids go back in 3 weeks, that they're doing so without risk? Even here in Calgary, under reduced class sizes, we only had 15 students in summer school at Calgary Catholic schools, and not many of them, only 2 high schools were open for summer school, and one of them had 3 students get COVID. And that's with only a few hundred kids in the school, 15 in a classroom. Those same protections aren't being put in place for this fall. So for the minister to have a news conference today where she speaks disrespectfully about literacy and numeracy and teachers, and that she's going to do something in a year from now, it says to me that she's trying to change the channel. She's trying to distract us from the fact that she hasn't done anything to protect kids and to make schools safer when kids go back this year. So she criticized literacy and numeracy. That's one of the things that I think we do incredibly well on in terms of global comparisons. If Alberta was its own country, our students would rank number 3 in the world, and in top 10 in math as well, I think number 8. So do we want to do even better? Of course we do. But trying to pull out one example from one test that one teacher used once to say this is curriculum, she doesn't understand curriculum. But the point is, she doesn't understand education. If she thinks you can put 25, 30, 35 kids in a grade 1 classroom with no additional supports, she's super out of touch. I was in a classroom yesterday, one of my friends who's setting up her kindergarten classroom, and normally there's centers where kids can play with things, they touch things, they move around. That's not going to be safe this year. So she's trying to figure out how to reduce the amount of things in the classroom and try to create a little bit of space, but that's a lot of little people in one space, and we want to make sure that they're safe and that the teachers who are working with them are safe as well. Yeah, I think that the government wants us to be distracted from the most important thing that not just we're dealing with in Alberta or not just dealing with in schools, but this is around the world. Making sure that children can go back to safely needs to be our top priority. And the government has done nothing to ensure that. So we came out with a 15-point plan. We're being propositional, and we came out with 15 points. The first few focus around increased sanitation, reasonable class sizes. The next few are around getting more space in the community, because the minister will say, well, we don't have enough schools to spread kids out that much. I know we have tremendous leadership in our communities. We have places of worship, we have libraries, we have community centers. Many would be willing to open their doors. Universities that aren't returning to traditional classrooms this year would be willing to open their doors and welcome students if it meant that the government was working to keep them safe. I think it's time for the government to roll up their sleeves, get to work. We only have 3 weeks. We want to make sure when kids go back to school that they can do so safely. And if we don't do it now, the consequences are far graver. I know $1 billion is a lot of money, but the cost of doing nothing is so much greater.